Okay, picture this. It's 530 BCE. The greatest conqueror the world has ever seen, Cyrus the Great, is at the absolute peak of his power. And then he's defeated, killed, his entire army just wiped out. But here's the crazy part. It wasn't by some rival empire. Nope, it was by a nomadic tribe from the steppes, the Massagatai, led by their queen. So how on earth did that happen? Well, that's the story we're diving into. And that really brings us to the central question here, right? How did this absolute titan of history, a guy who basically seemed to have a divine seal of approval for winning, get so completely outmaneuvered by Queen Tomyris, a leader that, let's be honest, most of us have never even heard of? The answer, it turns out, is more than just an amazing war story. It's a masterclass in strategy that is just as relevant today. All right, so to really get our heads around this incredible upset, we're going to look at it from a slightly different angle. Let's just forget the ancient history part for a second and think of this whole thing as a business case study. You've got this massive, dominant corporation, and it's looking to gobble up what it thinks is just some small, easy niche market.
So on one side, you have the Persian Empire. This is the global hegemon, the Amazon or Google of its day. It's got basically unlimited resources, a huge professional army, the whole 9 yards. And on the other side, the Massagatai, a bunch of fiercely independent nomads. I mean, it is the classic David versus Goliath story, and on paper, the power imbalance looks completely insane.
But, and this is key, as any good strategist will tell you, a giant's biggest strengths can often hide its deepest weaknesses. This wasn't just a simple battle between a king and a queen. No, this was a fundamental clash between two totally different ways of thinking, two different strategic models, the big, established incumbents and the agile, scrappy disruptor. So let's break down their leadership styles, their philosophies. You've got Cyrus, the incumbent. His whole model is built on scale and repeatable processes, right? He's got this standardized playbook for just absorbing new territories. But his biggest asset, all that success, is also his biggest weakness. He's got this bias, this belief that what worked yesterday will absolutely work tomorrow. And then you have Tomyris, the disruptor. Her advantages are the complete opposite. They aren't scalable, but man, are they powerful. She has this incredibly deep knowledge of her home turf, her market, and a culture that is literally built for fast, decisive warfare. And this, right here, gets to the absolute heart of what we call asymmetric advantage. It's all about incumbent vulnerability. You know, the very things that make a huge organization so powerful, all its processes, its massive scale, its long history, are the exact same things that make it slow, rigid, and super predictable. And those are the little cracks that a smaller, more nimble competitor can wedge open and turn into, well, catastrophic failures. Okay, so let's actually map this out for Cyrus. What's his biggest vulnerability? It's cognitive, a perfect 5 out of 5. I mean, his unbroken winning streak created this enormous blind spot. We're talking pure hubris. He just completely underestimated what was driving Tomyris. And his whole business model, the mighty Persian war machine, it was a logistical marvel, for sure, but it was designed for conquering cities and farmland. It was not designed to operate in the vast, empty steppes. His advantages weren't universal. They were totally dependent on the situation. And Tomyris, well, she was about to exploit every single one of these weaknesses, starting with his ego. And you see these vulnerabilities pop up right away in Cyrus's opening move. That incumbent mindset, which you could call success-induced orthodoxy, it made him think he could just acquire the Massagatai using the exact same playbook he'd used on everybody else.
So he kicks things off with a marriage proposal. Yeah, but this wasn't about romance. This was a straight-up hostile takeover bid. He wasn't trying to win over Tomyris. He was trying to win her kingdom. It was actually a standard move for the Persians, a kind of soft annexation. But this is where Tomyris immediately shows her strategic smarts. She sees right through this gold-digging scheme and just flatly shuts him down.
And this quote here, it just perfectly illustrates the cognitive bias going on in the Persian high command. When Cyrus's council is debating what to do next, his advisor, Cyrus, basically frames the entire problem around ego. The issue isn't strategy. It's about the shame of being challenged by a woman. And it's this hubris, this arrogance that leads Cyrus to reject a perfectly good offer for an honorable, contained battle and instead go for a dishonorable trap.
So, listening to Cyrus, Cyrus sets this now infamous wine trap. He literally weaponizes Persian luxury. He knows the Massagatai aren't used to drinking strong, unmixed wine, so he leaves this huge feast out in a seemingly abandoned camp. And Tomyris' son, who's leading a big chunk of her army, totally falls for it. They party, they get drunk, incapacitated, and then they're either slaughtered or captured. On the surface, it looks like a clever tactical win. But it was about to become a catastrophic strategic mistake.
Because the capture of her son, who then takes his own life in captivity, that was the tipping point. This intensely personal tragedy completely transforms the conflict. See, Cyrus thought he'd won a clever little victory, but what he'd actually done was hand Tomyris the one weapon he had absolutely no defense against, a righteous cause for total, all-out war. This is a perfect example of what we call response asymmetry. Tomyris takes this moment of just devastating personal loss and brilliantly turns it into a strategic corner that Cyrus can't escape. From this point on, Cyrus has no good moves left on the board. He can't retreat without looking weak, and he can't advance without facing a fanatically motivated enemy that's now fighting for pure vengeance on their own home turf. He's trapped.
And her response, wow. This is the crucial moment. What she says next isn't just an angry threat. It's a formal declaration, a solar oath. It fundamentally changes the rules of the game. She completely reframes the entire conflict. It's not a territorial dispute anymore. Now it's a personal vendetta. She's not just defending land, she's promising to personally quench Cyrus's own insatiable thirst for blood.
And in the final battle, you can just see how this all comes together. This is the moment where Tomyris masterfully flips the script, turning every single one of the Persians' supposed strengths, their huge numbers, their complex logistics, their disciplined formations into crippling liabilities.
It's a textbook example of something called the frontier paradox. Think of the Persian army like a massive, high-performance engine that needs super high-octane fuel and smooth, paved roads to run. But out on the steppes, there are no roads. There are no cities to resupply from. So the very scale of Cyrus's army, its sheer size and metabolism, it just becomes a giant anchor, weighing him down, stretching his supply lines until they're about to snap.
Tomyris's plan for the takedown was just brilliant. First, she fakes her retreat. She's playing directly on Cyrus's overconfidence, luring his army deeper and deeper into hostile territory. Then, she funnels his massive force into these narrow mountain passes. And in that kind of terrain, the Persians' huge numbers become useless. Worse than useless, actually. Their complex formations just turn into a chaotic mess. And just like that, she neutralizes their biggest advantage and forces a brutal, up-close, hand-to-hand fight. A war of daggers, where the raw, fierce motivation of her people was always going to win. The result, it was an absolute, unmitigated catastrophe for Persia. The army was annihilated, and Cyrus the Great was killed. Tomyris, true to her vow, found his body, cut off his head, and plunged it into a wineskin filled with human blood. And as she did, she said, "I will give you your fill of blood." It was the ultimate symbolic act, a total and complete destruction of the invincible brand that Cyrus had spent his entire life building. So okay, why does a 2,500-year-old battle on the steppes matter to us today? Well, because the strategic blueprint that Tomyris wrote for defeating a giant, it's being used right now, every single day. The battlefield has just changed. It's moved from the remote frontier to the modern boardroom. No, really, think about it. How did Netflix beat Blockbuster? It wasn't by building more stores. It identified Blockbuster's step, all that physical infrastructure, and turned it into a massive liability. Or look at craft breweries. They didn't try to compete with the big guys on price. They changed the entire battleground to authenticity, a game where being small is actually a huge advantage. In every one of these cases, the disruptor wins by refusing to play the incumbent's game. They find that one vulnerability created by scale, and they just change the rules completely. And that, right there, is the big takeaway from this whole story. Asymmetric advantage isn't just about being scrappy or lucky. It is a deliberate, calculated strategy. It's all about finding a way to compete where your opponent's greatest strengths, all their money, their infrastructure, their sterling reputation, suddenly become their biggest weaknesses. So as you look around at the dominant, seemingly invincible companies of today, the question we're left with is, which of these modern Goliaths are ignoring the Queen's gathering at their frontiers?